Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of our Community Access. This week we have another great book signing, all today at our Community Access. Welcome back, another great book signing. This week we went to the You'll Love It Lavender Farm with the writer Iris Underwood. With the story is our reporter Rachel Baker. Rachel?
Since 2011, when I first became director at Addison Township Library, and Iris has done a writer's workshop at our library, and I got to know Iris through her dedication to the library and the people she knows there. And then over the years we became friends, and I'm really excited for this accomplishment for Iris. She's an inspiration to our community. She's so creative, and she loves what she does in her work on the farm and her work through literature. She's an inspiration for all of us, and a wonderful support to the library and the community.
I teach English at Oakland Community College since 1989, and Iris was one of my students in English 1710, Introduction to Fiction. I re-met Iris again when my wife got the job here in Addison Township, and ironically we ran into each other again.
So I first met Iris in 2013 at the Detroit Public Library, and she became one of the first docents. So I've known Iris for about 5 years now, and we've become friends.
What do you think, what is one of your favorite characteristics about her as a friend and as a writer?
I think she's so talented in everything she does. From writing to this farm to her relationships with people.
That sounds absolutely great. So your husband was also telling me a little bit about the tours that you guys do at the Detroit Public Library. Can you tell me a little bit about that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I might not shut up. Yes, so we do art and architecture tours of the Detroit Public Library. Free tours where the public comes in, and we spend 1 hour. We walk around the library, show them different artifacts and different objects. And I will tell you, Iris's favorite is the bronze front doors. Those are her favorite items in the library. They were inspired by Donatella's sacristy doors from the Church of St. Lorenzo from Florence, Italy. And they're beautiful. They're 15 feet bronze doors with 10 different panels. 5 are Roman, 5 are Greek.
It's got to be fulfilling. What does it mean to you to bring that to the community?
Oh, I feel very lucky. I feel lucky. People are so appreciative and eager and excited to hear about it and learn. So I feel like you're making a difference. People come back for 2 or 3 tours. So
thank you for your contribution to the community at large. This is such a great thing you do.
Thank you.
My dear guests, thank you for taking time to celebrate the publication of The Mantle, my first novel. The past 20 years, people have asked, what's your book about? If you approached a member of my Monday night critique group, you'd most likely hear various replies. Forgiveness, fidelity, redemption, love, resilience, and home. Yes, the story embodies these themes, yet they lay hidden when the Mantle and I were younger. I hadn't yet read enough stories like Moby Dick, the doll maker, and Silas Marner to perceive them. I hadn't experienced significant loss and gain to comprehend the Mahari way and their people. Heglin, the tribe's priest and protagonist who opens the mantle crawling out of Elgaba, a meteor crater. And Stebban, the primary antagonist who believes the Mahari are fools. It took outside research and walking a good long while with King Joseph to see his guilt as a young prince when he overhears a dispute between his grandfather and childhood priest. After many rewrites, I at last heard the unknown word prophecy fall upon Prince Joseph's ears as he passed his priest's open window. I followed King Joseph and his horse Basha through the Mahari gate and prairie into the forest to the word tree before I realized he never speaks the word time. The Mahari and all known survivors of Humani have no knowledge of the clock. King Joseph, 7th generation since Humani, the invasion of disease and death from the other side of the mountain, listens to the stars and hears the Maker's message in an unknown tongue. He trusts the Maker for the interpretation to guide and multiply his people. Do I romanticize the writer's task? I believe not. Madeline Lingle, author of Walking on Water, Reflections on Faith in Art, declares, we are to be in this world as healers, as listeners, and as servants. In art, we are once again able to do all the things we had forgotten. We are able to walk on water. We speak to the angels who call us. We move unfettered among the stars. We write, we make music, we draw pictures, because we are listening for meaning, feeling for healing. And during the writing of the story or the painting, we are returned to that open creativity which was ours when we were children. We cannot be mature artists if we have lost the ability to believe, which we had as children. An artist at work is in a condition of complete and total faith. It was by faith and frugality I traveled to Ireland, traversed a sea cave in search of verisimilitude to test the believability of the Mahari's legend of the weeping wind. There, I heard Prince Robin's voice. It was by faith I sat in my writing chair and did just that, in Ireland and home in my study. An Irish, Scot, German Appalachian, word by word, I trusted my inheritance to foster the way of the storyteller within me, the patient process that proclaims life is a miracle. Throughout our literature, Wendell Berry says in his essay titled The Work of Local Culture, the normal thing was for the generations to succeed one another in place. The memorable stories occurred when this succession failed or was somehow threatened. The norm is given in Psalm 128, in which this succession is seen as one of the rewards of righteousness. Thou shalt see thy children's children, and peace upon Israel. This longing seems to have been universal, Berry says. It presides also over the Odyssey, in which Odysseus' desire to return home is certainly regarded normal. The Bible makes much of what it sees as normal succession. In such stories as those of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or David and Solomon, in which the son completes the work or the destiny of the father. The parable of the prodigal son is prepared for by such Old Testament stories as that of Jacob, who errs, wanders, returns, is forgiven, and takes his place in the family lineage. The Mahari understand we are all sojourners who walk this earth in search of purpose. They term this calling parquet. My calling as a writer began with letters to my childhood Canadian pen pal and poetry penciled to a Kentucky cousin. In 1967, within Lincoln High School, Miss Margaret Lieneman quickened my pen with words of praise on my first essay written in her senior English class. I wrote about my beloved coal mining uncles, who appear as King Joseph, Heglin, and Leonard in The Mantle. Yes, we are all storytellers. To be whole and live in peace, we must risk revealing what matters to us. We must listen to one another, seek understanding. So, I thank you for listening to words from my heart, the greatest gift you can give. Within The Mantle, Kish and Oldaliah portray most sacrificially a devotion to their parquet and the vitality of the Mahari tribe. They speak of tragedy and loss that touch the emptiness in every soul. Truly, we cannot escape suffering. Queen Vashti, King Joseph's wife, values the memory and stories necessary to strengthen her children to fulfill their purpose, and does so through her embroidery and songs. In longing and sorrow, she touches her mother's orler, the pendant and only possession from her matriarchs. In submission to King Joseph, she too left her family to propagate the Mahari way, to bring forth a prince, heir to the king's mantle. Steuben threatens this succession. Will he succeed? What are the unknown words from the star spoke to King Joseph? What is the prophecy? Indeed, a many-layered love story waits to answer your questions. To aid your illumination of character and place, my friend and fellow artist Joyce Parlukovitz said yes when I asked if she would illustrate my epic. Now, as a reader and the painter of the Mantle's art, she will share some of her perspectives of the tale.
It's wonderful to be here. This is just a fabulous day. Thank you all for coming. Everyone loves art, I'm willing to believe. The love of art is as old as man himself, emanating from the natural beauty around him. The beauty of stories told out loud to an audience, the beauty of stories told in secret, lonely places, scribed on paper and collected in books. The beauty of wordless stories, drawn and shaped, light and dark, many-hued and recorded on canvases to be enjoyed, as those you see in the room over there. From an early age, the Mahari children on seventh night gathered in the Kantaja's Menta for storytelling and to practice and add to their storyboards. Wise and civilized and cultured folk, those Mahari, in the Mantle. I met Iris in an upstairs studio on Friday nights in an historic building in downtown Romeo, where we practiced on our own storyboards under the watchful eye of our beloved art instructor, August Gloss. We were taught pastels. If he were alive today, though indeed his spirit is here with us, I think he would be pleased to see what has transpired among two of his more challenging students. How How did the illustrations for this book come about? An easy place is to begin with the easy questions. Wow, did you really draw that? Yep. It doesn't look like paint. What is it? Well, actually it is. I use pastels, pure pigment with the smallest amount of binder. In this sense, pastels are purer than oil paints diluted with oil or acrylics diluted with polymer emulsion. If it isn't paint, how does it stick? The painting surface is sandpaper. A fine-grained, acid-free, or archival sandpaper, which means it's supposed to last for a very long time. The sandpaper grains capture the pigment, allowing many layers of color and the opportunity to create translucency or transparency with every bit as much control with a pastel as with a brush. Degas painted with pastels. Monet painted with pastels on essentially paper bags. You can see their work in museums today. That's pretty good artistic company. How did the original paintings become images in the book? You get a really good photographer to take photos and create digital files from which the book designer works. So that's how that happened. Did you do research? Did you read the book first? Oh, yes. 20 hours of reading preceded the start of actual artwork. It didn't take long to recognize that there is no lack of vibrating imagery to capture and represent this story. And amazingly, an author who stood aside and refused to tread on my judgment and direction. Maddeningly so sometimes. It took my breath away. Far more interesting, however, are the juicy secrets of this work. Those of you who know me know that I'm a devoted, dedicated, voracious reader. That's rather a characteristic of English teachers. You also know that I am not a fiction reader. So, in a large 6-inch thick cardboard box came the manuscript of The Mantle. Epic tale, love story, a Bildungsroman of nearly 600 pages. My comfort zone, gone just like that. In my art production and interests, I happily clomp along as a studio and occasionally a plein air painter. Inspiration right there in front of me, the richness and beauty of usually the landscape there for the taking and manipulation. It's a scary challenge to interpret word pictures and led to things like beadwork strung up all over my studio as models for the design of King Joseph's mantle on the cover. I even got some raised eyebrows after church one Sunday as I took reference photos of our lectern in the sanctuary, complete with 4-inch thick Oxford Complete Ecclesiastical Dictionary, which was the inspiration for the winged book painting. But as usually happens, the completely unexpected embraces the unsuspecting. And I fell deeply into this story, in love with the characters. The truth is, I was compelled and urged on by the characters. This overpowered the fear of inadequacy and the great concern I had to please the author. I just could not let the characters down. So then, how did you decide what scenes to paint? This is where it gets really interesting. In the creative process, the artist is a servant, a giver of visual life to the story. One could argue any time we paint, we enter into a creative process in which we have a relationship with the subject. And thereby the artist becomes a servant, a giver of visual life. Moreover, sometimes the work comes to the artist and says, "Serve me." Oh, yes, it does. Careful not to let that clamorous know-it-all work overpower this sometimes delicate process. The artist, by virtue of experience and patience, knows how to listen, step aside, and get out of the way as the art helps create itself. It's a privilege to work as an artist. To quote Madeleine L'Engle of A Wrinkle in Time fame, "The largest part of the job of the artist is to listen to the work and to go where it tells him to go." And An artist at work is in a condition of complete and total faith. I serve the work. It led me to the creation of the paintings. So, if I were to create more paintings of this story, what others would I now do? Katja at the wood range or the wood stove, baking Prince Robham's favorite honey cake. Prince Robham in that heady, dreamy childhood moment in the forest dancing Basha the horse by the word tree. King Joseph clambering up the word tree without a stitch of goods on, while the word tree granted him a sacred moment, the sacred words sparkling golden swirls on the trunk. Katja in her wedding procession to meet her betrothed King Rame, and maybe a dozen more. Throughout this process, I was propelled forward by these characters and so many more. I could not let them down. And it's my ardent hope that I didn't let them down. Thank you.
So that's just touching the surface. I hope you understand that. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible.
So, not knowing that much about it, what genre would you say this book would fall under?
What genre? This has been the biggest debate from the very beginning with my writing critique. Will you critique, folks, please stand up and be acknowledged. Diana, Debbie, Shar, Kim, Elaine, Jack, Nadia back there. My Detroit Working Writers buddies, would you please wave, stand and wave, please. All these folks, we've had this conversation, especially when we would get into the whole editorial part of what to do. That is one reason why I self-published my book, because I couldn't fit into pigeonholes. I could not do it. I had an editor from Fort Wayne, Indiana, the first professional edit, and he couldn't name what the genre was either. He said, it's fantasy. I said, no. And this was the argument at my writing group on Monday night too. I said, no, this has happened in the past, and it will happen again, and it's happening now. So it's not fantasy. Everything is probable. I tested it. Remember in the sea cave? I know it's possible. So other folks have called it literary fiction. I like that because it's not, literary fiction is broad and it's a respectable genre as far as it's not pigeonholed into young adult or speculative fiction or whatever. So that's a long answer.
Did your childhood influence the characters or the telling of the story?
My whole life did, particularly the death of our firstborn daughter. You know, it's all connected. The people I met during the 10 years with the lavender farm, people who just walked on the farm for the day or the minute or the hour. They brought some peace to the puzzle. In the 4 years reading the Mantle to my Monday night group, you know, the critique there. Every single week we meet. So those folks, for you folks who really want to write your story, be it fiction or nonfiction, find a good critique group. I mean, there are cheesy groups that just want to tear you apart and take control of your work. That's not my group. And just keep at it. Don't let anything discourage you. Nothing.
When did you know it was done? How did you know it was done?
I love that question, Sheldon. My second trip to Ireland, I went particularly because I was at the conclusion and I didn't know how it concluded. But I thought it concluded in a sea cave. Because from the beginning it opens in the sea. See, I don't want to give too many disclaimers here. So I just felt that that's where I would find the answer. Not that I didn't find plenty of answers in my study. The bulk of the story was written in my study. That's where the ideas came. That's where the voices came. As Joyce said, the creative direction came there. That's where I surrendered. One time Mel came home from work and he opens the door. I meet him at the kitchen door, and I've been crying my eyes out because I wrote the most difficult part of the book that day, the first draft of it, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I couldn't make dinner. I couldn't talk. And so I pulled myself together and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. That was the middle. That was the breaking point. And from that point on, it was not as painful. It was not as difficult. So when I went to Ireland, I went with faith, like I said in my talk, that I would see the reality. It would all the points, all the promises that I made throughout the story would be fulfilled in that sea cave. I didn't get into a sea cave, but I got at the mouth of the sea cave, and I heard the drumming sound of the ocean beating against the walls, and I felt the lichen on the walls. And that's when I heard Prince Robin's voice and what the prophecy was. That's where I heard it. So I went back to my room that I rented in Anamcara, which means soul friend. It's an artist retreat in Ireland. So I sat there and overlooked the cattle grazing day after day in the rain and in the sun, watched the sunrise over the bay. Because people had said, you know, Iris, you have another story after this. So as I listened to Robin's voice in the sea cave, he said, it is finished. This is it. And I walked out of that room exuberant, just so relieved, because I don't have that burden. You know, that story is finished, and now others will fall. That's how I knew. The Muse spoke so clearly, just like that day in the Detroit Public Library. The first time I followed Barbara. Barbara is the docent who started the tour at the Detroit Public Library, and that also pulled so many things together as far as the story is concerned, the mantle. Have any of you ever been to the Detroit Public Library?
Yeah.
Okay. You know that beautiful balustrade with the Blashville art surrounding you? I stood there and I heard those beautiful muses say, "These are your kind." Now that is a pretty delusional thing to hear. And I just sort of stumbled back a little bit. It took some while to accept that. You know, I don't have to be a Poe or a William Dean Howells, the first dean of American literature. That's not me. I'm fulfilling my calling. But that was one great part of the whole picture. So don't belittle any experience, no matter how small. When a person looks you in the eyes and touches your hand and says something that quickens your heart, embrace it and see where it goes.
There you go, another great story with another great writer. So, for our reporter Rachel Baker and our photographer and editor Russell Currier, I'm Bill Service, and you have a wonderful, wonderful week.